Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first and inaugural episode of the Football Podcast. I am Jonathan Ahrens, joined alongside by Adam Wilkins, and today we're going to be grading the off seasons of some of the teams in the AFC, specifically the AFC East and the AFC North.
I want to talk a little bit about what does it mean to you to grade their off season? Like, what does that look like? Are you grading on a curve? Like, how did you come to these conclusions?
Yeah, the way that I did it is I basically looked at three different parts, really two, because the first one is coaching. So if you didn't have any major coaching changes, obviously that one's not going to be talked about as much. But then the second main portions is your draft and your free agency. So not just the players that you acquired, players you lost, as well as potential extensions to players that you needed to keep on your roster. So, kind of a holistic approach we'll be going through. Not going to be fully analyzing and giving a grade to each individual draft or free agency, but just kind of looking at it cumulatively. How do I grade their off season? So that kind of means that I am grading on a curve in the sense of not every team is starting from the same place. So a good offseason for the Raiders is going to look different than a good offseason for the Chiefs. So
Yeah,
you
even
kind of have to
some of
take
these
that.
teams, it's not even about like, did they add two or three wins to the record column next season? I feel like one of the things I realized for me, and I was nervous I was almost grading too harshly, but what's really important for me at least is to have like a clear direction moving forward.
Yeah.
Like, do we have a clear direction? Are these moves moving us in that direction?
Oh yeah.
A lot of teams that don't have that clear direction, I just gave a bad grade because I'm like, what are you doing? And it kind of pissed me off a little bit.
Entirely
to
fair.
to be
There
frank.
were some there were some off seasons that made me a little concerned for the future of some of these franchises. And then there are some where I see the vision and it may not even tangibly correlate to all of a sudden going from from worst to first, but I see the foundation and the vision of the off season. That's what I'm grading on.
Heck yeah, me too. Alrighty, well let's get right into it. What's your first team, Jonathan?
Yeah, so the way that we broke this down is we each took a division from the AFC. So I took East and West, and Adam, you took presumably North and South.
I did.
So that's good. I'm glad that we prepared accordingly. Uh, I'm going to be starting off talking about the AFC East, and I'm going bottom up. So basically the standings of the previous season. So that would mean that we're starting with the New England Patriots. Now,
That's a good one. That's a good
bef-
one to start.
it is a good one to start. We might peak with this one in terms of quality off seasons. Before I talk about each off season, I kind of want to give a little bit of a rundown of the previous season. So the record was 4-13. And immediately from there, and this, to be clear, did not affect my grade whatsoever because it was the previous season. But there was a significant problem because they should have been 3-14. They won a meaningless Week 18 game where the Buffalo Bills were resting everybody, and in doing so, it bumped them from the first overall pick to the fourth overall pick. So even if you like Will Campbell and that draft class, you're inherently giving up draft positioning that you could trade down for and have an extra first round pick next year, an extra second round pick that same draft or next year. Who knows what packages would have been offered, but that wasn't great. Uh, they had a below average defense and a below average offseason, but the ultimate takeaway from last uh or below average offense. The ultimate takeaway from last season, though, is that none of that matters because they think they have their guy in Drake May. So all of the context of this offseason has been about building around Drake May. And so the first thing that we look at with coaching, bringing in Mike Vrabel, another former linebacker, Patriot way, but it's a little bit different than the previous coaching hire, the Gerard Mayo. There's not much to say because I think that Mike Vrabel is kind of a known commodity. He's a good
Right.
head coach. He's a floor raiser. He's a
I
culture
don't know.
setter.
I feel like he's so underrated. Like, think about the fact that he took a team led by Ryan Tannehill to win the
Yes.
AFC. Like,
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
an incredible floor raiser.
Yeah, when I say known commodity, I mean that as a compliment in terms of I don't have any questions about
Uh-huh.
where the floor of this team is going to be. It's really
Right.
what can the ceiling be? Not just this season, but seasons to come as well. It is going to be interesting bringing Josh McDaniels back in to be the offensive coordinator, a role that clearly should be the ceiling of his career. His head coaching stints have not gone well, but as an offensive
Yeah.
coordinator, the Patriots have done nothing but win Super Bowls. Yes, that was with Tom Brady at the helm, but that's all they do is win Super Bowls with Josh McDaniels coordinating the offense. So, quality coaching hire and staff, in my opinion. And then you get to the draft, and I'm not going to be going through, Adam, I don't believe, is going to be either each pick, but I want to throw in a few highlights. The first is obviously fourth overall pick, Will Campbell, tackle out of LSU. He fills a need and sets a tone. He comes out after drafted talking about how he's going to die for Drake May and put his life on the line, saying all the right things that you need to hear. So even if worst case scenario, he simply doesn't have the length to make it as a tackle, he'll be a quality guard no matter what. So you're filling a hole on that offensive line, really worst case scenario. Uh, I really love their next pick, which was Travion Henderson at running back out of Ohio State.
Uh-huh.
Josh McDaniels is going to have so much fun with this guy. He is explosive, and the most NFL ready aspect of his game is out of the backfield, catching balls out of the backfield. And he's going to come in and immediately be used to pick up critical third downs right
Mhm.
away. So
Which to your point,
yeah.
that's such an important asset to have for a young quarterback. Just knowing that
Yes.
you have a check down available, like you have that safety
Oh,
blanket.
yeah.
Just I think it can reduce the amount of bad decisions that a young quarterback will make.
Yeah, Drake May had the opposite of a safety blanket last season. He had he had danger blankets, if that's a term. He had guys that
They were like
you simply
electrocuted.
yes, it felt like Drake May would look at a target downfield and there would be an electrical impulse. He was zapped and be like, I cannot throw it to that guy, and that was every weapon in their offense. So. Kyle Williams, wide receiver out of Washington State. What has been the biggest problem for Patriots wide receivers, really post Brady? Separation. If you look at the numbers and it's advanced statistics, I don't know how much is publicly available. The wide receivers for the Patriots have had the worst separation of anybody in the league. This guy can separate. He has speed. He is tall. He can go up and catch 50-50 balls. But the nice thing about him is he's fast enough and mobile enough to where he's not going to be in a position a lot to have to catch 50-50 balls. So, yeah, when you look at it overall, I think you also throw in Jared Wilson, the center out of Georgia, who might be the most, he's raw. He might be the most athletic center prospect this century. So just a great draft by the Patriots, in my opinion. And then you get into their free agency. And this is where uh, potentially the most criticism would come from, considering how much money New England had to spend. But it was a filling holes philosophy. And the biggest criticism is probably that they overpaid some guys. The problem is that they almost have to. They're no longer a dynasty. They're not in a position where they can pay 75 cents on the dollar to get a guy. They have to pay 125 cents on the dollar to get a guy. And sometimes that's okay. So, for example, I think the poster boy of that this offseason is Milton Williams, the 25-year-old third round pick from Philly. He hasn't really sniffed a Pro Bowl, much less an All-Pro, and they give him, I believe, a 4-year contract worth up to over $100 million. But sometimes you have to take a risk and pay a guy that much money when you're in a position like the Patriots are.
It's
You
crazy how
revamp,
much money he made because of that Super Bowl game.
yeah. I mean that's kind of the headline, and that's the criticism. My response to that is, what else do you want the Patriots to do in
Right.
that scenario? I mean,
Right.
there's not many uh, alternatives for
Hmm.
them. They completely revamped the offensive line as well between the draft. I mean, they bring in the veteran tackle Morgan Moses, Garnett Bradbury, the guard, Wes or the center Bradbury, Wes Schweitzer at guard, and then really probably the biggest question for the Patriots, as it was last season, and it certainly improved, but it's still, what are the weapons? Because the wide receiver room is still pretty scarce. You bring in Matt Collins and Stephon Diggs.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Stephon Diggs situation, it seems like as of the time that we're recording this, June 1st, it's mostly blown over, and I think it's going to be fine. I mean, ironically, it's not even like a top three boating scandal in NFL history. Like, far worse things have gone down on boats in the NFL. Uh, but there are some questions in the wide receiver room for certain. But when you look at it all together, I was wavering between an A plus and an A, and I think ultimately, given where the starting point was, I have to give it an A plus. I just do.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you said that makes a lot of sense to me at least, but a lot of people might not quite be behind the idea is just like the concept of not going all in with all of the cap space that you have. Just
Mhm.
because I think this year, like they're not expected to, win their division, especially with the Bills in it. Like this is not a playoff team. Like that should not be
Well,
their.
actually,
Oh, you think they're
I
a
don't
playoff
know.
team?
Well, no, it's not that I think. Have you seen how easy their schedule is? They're favored in 11 of their games, according to Vegas.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
they're division because they're playing a fourth place
Yeah,
schedule, and their two divisions that they play
yeah.
are the AFC South and the
Okay.
NFC South.
Oh my gosh, yeah, they really did get the worst two divisions in football.
Yep. So I mean,
Okay, well,
they might purely by the schedule be a playoff team. Now, if they were playing an average NFL schedule, this isn't a record prediction video, but I'd say they'd have a chance to be 8-9 and 8, 8-9.
mhm.
But no, they have a chance to win double-digit games purely not just because of the schedule. They did improve that much, but the
Right.
schedule's a large part of it.
Well, and I guess really what I was getting at, whether or not they're a playoff team or whatever, basically
Yeah,
my
it doesn't
point is
matter.
just that they need to figure out what they have in Drake May. I feel like people have jumped the gun a little bit. Like Drake May had a good season, but there's a qualifier there. He had a good season for a rookie, and he took the job from Jacoby Brissett. Like to say
Well,
that
I
we
think
know for a
it's
fact that this is like a franchise guy is a little
yeah.
bit, it's just like you're jumping the gun a little bit. I think you need to just, again, improve better and create a situation where we can actually potentially put the blame on Drake May or say that, okay, he did elevate within this new context. And that's what the Patriots did. So, like, I agree with your overall grade. They don't have to go all in yet. I don't think they really know what they have with Drake May quite yet.
I think internally there's a lot of belief in Drake May, but I think your
Agreed.
point is correct, which is they're preserving cap space for the future
Mhm.
because they're far more likely this is going to be if let's say they're on a 3-year plan, including last year, this is the second year, and then depending on how this goes, you could push in the chips year three. So I'm
Yeah.
with you there. I'm grading it in the context of that 3 to 4 year plan.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Let's go Patriots, I guess. I'm not really
Yeah.
particularly a Patriots fan, but if you are, then this is good news because they made some great moves. They had a good draft overall, and
Oh yeah.
of course, they have a clear direction moving forward, which is great.
100%. Well, moving on next to the Jets. The New York Jets, 5-12 last season. Below average defense and an offense that couldn't crack 20 points per game. They were sitting at 19.9 points per game. Uh, I'm not going to relive the Aaron Rodgers saga because he's out of there. So we don't really have to drag ourselves into the Aaron Rodgers discussion. You can more so when you eventually talk about the Steelers, but that's the Jets have moved on. I think the biggest silver lining of last season for the Jets is that it was just enough of a dumpster fire to clear house and completely reset.
Yeah.
That's probably the most optimistic way to look at last season. So, this is yet again another one where we have a major coaching change. Robert Saleh's out, interim coaches all moved out, and we're bringing in Aaron Glenn, the previous defensive coordinator for Detroit. Aaron Glenn is, I think, someone who exists in the same vein. Not that he's nearly as much of a known commodity as Vrabel, but it's a Vrabel type hire. You're bringing him in to set a culture and bring in a defensive personality. The bigger one that I wanted to talk about is bringing in offensive coordinator Tanner Engstrand. And I will give you, uh, I don't think most people know exactly who this guy is. All they know is that he got brought over from Detroit with Aaron Glenn. Tanner Engstrand is a baby by NFL coaching standards. He comes from the Harbaugh tree. He was at San Diego State when Harbaugh was the head coach there, and then moved with him eventually to Michigan. And then obviously he makes his way to Detroit, works his way up there, and is now brought over. But there's a weird little 1 year gap in the NFL resume in 2019. Do you want to guess what he was doing in 2019?
I don't know, selling insurance or something stupid like that. Is it football related?
It is football related. He was the
Coaching
offensive.
Pee-wee. Oh, okay, sorry.
He was the offensive coordinator of the DC Defenders of the XFL.
There we go.
Yep. So this is someone who this is going to be his first chance to fully implement an offensive vision entirely, mostly by himself, because Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilkes, the defensive coordinator, are mostly going to be known for their defensive side of the ball. So Engstrand is a complete mystery coaching hire, and he gets to immediately come in and establish himself. The draft for New York is, I think it's par for the course. I think that they filled needs, but there's also, I can't help but be skeptical of some of them. So you look at Armand Membu, tackle out of Mizzou, and by all accounts, I have no reason to believe that it would work out, except for the entire history of the New York Jets drafting offensive linemen and it not panning out for them. And I know it's a completely new regime, but I still have a bad taste in my mouth from that.
Right.
They bring in Mason Taylor, tight end from LSU. You know, he's athletic and he certainly fills a need in the tight end room, but overall, the draft was something to where nothing jumped out at me in terms of, oh, this is going to be an immediate, impactful player,
Right.
mainly on the offensive side of the ball, which is where the biggest concerns are going to be. Because when we look towards free agency, it's a weird group of free agency hires because for the most part, with the exception of Justin Fields, and really with Justin Fields, the theme of their free agency is a bunch of bargain bin crapshoots. got like there's not a single player, with the exception of maybe Brandon Stevens at cornerback, who they paid meaningful money. Brandon Stevens, relative to his position, he's getting 3 years, $36 million, and he's coming off of a poor year.
Yeah.
I mean, he's kind of getting paid for his 2023 season,
Yeah.
and that's but with his poor season last year, that's why Baltimore let him go. You're looking at a free agency where there's a lot of people out there at the end of next season, near the end of next season, who are going to be able to go, look at that guy that the Jets signed, and they got him for single digit millions. What an incredible contract they got him on. And that's going to be kind of ignoring the 7 to 8 players that they brought in who were basically the equivalent of burning money. And so it's the ratio of money spent to value added, I don't think is going to be that favorable to New York. I also don't necessarily think that it, at this point, can be judged too harshly because this is a team that did not have playoff talent entering this offseason. And
Right.
yes, it still doesn't have playoff talent, but the biggest reason why, and I'll just go ahead and say I gave this offseason a flat B, and the coaching hires are doing a lot of the heavy lifting there
Okay.
because I do believe in Aaron Glenn, and I do like a hire like Tanner Engstrand because it's a guy who's clearly chomping at the bit to be able to execute a vision. He's young. He's going to be excited to mold a guy like Justin Fields into an offensive system because Justin Fields, no offense, hasn't earned enough NFL credibility to kind of do his own thing. So he's going to be completely malleable in that sense. The offensive
Right.
system will be entirely, hopefully, a coherent vision for the first time in a while, which will be a welcome departure from the Aaron Rodgers years, where it feels like the offense is just Aaron Rodgers as an offensive coordinator, which really one of the only guys who's been able to do that in recent memory in NFL history as an old man is Tom Brady. And even Tom Brady at the end was doing it with offensive masterminds. Really, the only one that comes to mind is Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning
Yeah, I
is
was
the
gonna
only
say Peyton Manning.
quarterback in his old age who was basically just able to use his offensive and football IQ to manage an offense. Uh, so I have to give this offseason a B. They didn't take
Yeah.
any steps back. They only took steps forward. Now you can sit up here and say, and I don't even know this is true, but maybe there's some Aaron Rodgers super fans out there that are like, what do you mean? They clearly took a step back at the quarterback position. But I think you have to grade it on a curve of, yes, is Justin Fields as talented as Aaron Rodgers? No. Is there a chance that this offense is going to look better with Justin Fields at the quarterback compared to Aaron Rodgers? 1,000% yes. And that's not in reference to the level of talent. It's kind of everything else, the intangibles.
Sure. I don't know. I feel like you're being a little bit gracious here. Just because, like, what was the Jets' record last year again?
5-12.
I just like don't see them really elevating in terms of their record. And there's just a part of me that says that if you're not going to get like significantly better, like why like they're just kind of sticking with this mediocrity that doesn't seem to be like pushing them in a certain direction. And I get the head coach hires, which I think I also have different opinions about than you, but
Fair.
basically like in my mind it's when you're hiring a new head coach like this, like it just seems like there wasn't enough turnaround in order for him to, I guess, have like a blank canvas. And you're bringing in a quarterback like Justin Fields, who hasn't really had, he was okay to start the season last year for the Steelers. He was good enough for everyone to say, like, oh, what are they doing starting Russell Wilson over him? But this is just not a guy who's been able to figure it out in the NFL. And so maybe, again, it is all dependent upon just like this new offensive coordinator and being able to maximize him. I'm not familiar with him or his scheme, but I don't know. It just seems like they didn't like establish themselves in a certain direction. And so
That's
for me,
fair.
like, I don't know, like it just seems like they just didn't really do anything either way. And for a team that is not good and for the past like decade has been not good, this does not seem like a productive offseason.
That's fair. Again, it's why I like I say the head coaching hire is doing a lot of heavy lifting for me because I do believe, and this is almost certainly a hot take, I believe, not with certainty, but there is a legitimate possibility that 5 years from now we're going to look back and say who was the better coordinator hire from Detroit to a head coach, and the better hire was Aaron Glenn compared to Ben Johnson. I'm there.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
that's why I say Aaron Glenn is doing a lot of heavy lifting for me
Yeah.
with this offseason.
I don't know. I just don't know how to feel about Aaron Glenn because I felt he did a lot last year and he did a lot of impressive stuff with the Lions because obviously like they were just so injured. Like there was a point at the end of the season where they were missing like their entire defensive line. And so for him to continue to be able to be successful outside of that with that defense is impressive. It's just like I just don't know if we really got to see all of it because he didn't have those pieces and he resorted to like a full-on blitz. Like I'm specifically remembering the game against the 49ers where it was like that
Yeah.
was like his strategy. It was just like we're going to send
Yeah.
everybody because we don't have the pieces.
Which I mean, I get your point, but also it speaks to the point that they didn't have anyone that had to be his offensive scheme. It's like we got to muck up this offense somehow. We
Yeah.
don't have the bodies to be able to do it in a typical sense. And I also think that more of my enjoyment of Aaron Glenn is even less about defensive scheme and what the
Mhm.
ceiling is there. And I just think he's going to be a welcome culture change from the
Okay.
previous, decade.
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible and there's only one way to find out. And so we'll see.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to move on to one of my teams. One of the teams that are a little bit higher. So, like we talked about before, I'm going to be going over the AFC North and South. So let's just start off on a good note with the Ravens. So, like we talked about a lot, we're going to be grading on a curve. So basically, when I'm looking at these grades, the first thing I'm asking myself is what is their expectations for next year? I think that the Ravens, obviously, within the last 2 to 3 years, their expectation has always been win a Super Bowl. And I think generally the perception about the Ravens is that they have the pieces and they have the talent led by Lamar Jackson and now Derrick Henry to be able to compete for a Super Bowl and to win it. And so for them, it's not necessarily about making these crazy moves because they have to get way better. Because last year they had a 12-5 record, they won their division, and obviously they lost in a really, really sad fashion in a close game because Mark Andrews dropped the ball. And so when I was looking at them, the biggest weakness that I really found, and I think, being a Bengals fan and therefore watching the Ravens pretty heavily, their secondary last year was like definitely their weakest unit. I can think
Yeah.
back to all of the Bengals games where it's like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, obviously an excellent connection, but it was just ridiculous how many yards they were able to stack up
Yes.
against that defense. And so, one of the reasons why that was the case was because of a name we mentioned before, Brandon Stevens, who gave up nearly 1,000 yards altogether. Um, and they obviously have the pieces. They have Marlon Humphrey, they have Kyle Hamilton, but they just need more from that unit. And I think they did a really, really good job addressing that. And I think they actually might have had one of the best draft classes in the NFL. They picked up Malachi Starks in the first round, who I think most people consider to be the best safety in the draft. Obviously, he's a very versatile safety, and he has great instincts. He can make the tackle. I think that he's going to be a really good weapon to have next to Kyle Hamilton, just because they both can do so many different things. You, as a defensive coordinator, will be able to create so many different, I guess, like disadvantages for the offense. You can disguise anything you want because they have that mix of skill where they can be a roamer, they can cover one-on-one, and they can blitz and put pressure on the quarterback. And being able to do all three of those things and have two guys that can do that is incredibly beneficial. The other guy that they picked up of note was Mike Green in the second round. We'll see. He dropped for a reason. Like during the combine, he kind of just like admitted that he caught a case, which was really funny to see. That he just like kind of came out and was like, "Yeah, so there was this
Yeah.
incident." Anyway, like, so that was interesting to see. But obviously, on the field, he's a great pick. He probably would have been maybe a late first round, upper second round pick if it wasn't for his off the field issues. Last year,
The
he led college
Ravens,
football with
the
17
Ravens don't
sacks.
really don't really shy away from
No.
those types of guys.
Although I will say they did release Justin Tucker and they picked one up in the draft, a kicker up in the draft.
I think that might be a little bit more to the quality of play. I don't want to give them too much credit, but
Maybe they just like were looking for an out, and then they released the story. They were like keeping it quiet because he was, the best kicker in football. He
that
had
was
one
their
bad
solution.
season. They were just holding it over his head. They were like,
Oh
if you
my
miss this
goodness.
kick, we're done.
That's terrible.
But anyway, so obviously they picked up some guys, DeAndre Hopkins, Chidobe Awuzie, who's okay. I mean, decent picks. I guess the one flaw is they didn't necessarily like add many weapons for Lamar Jackson.
That's the
But
big thing that stood out to me is kind
yeah,
of what are you doing to repair the wide receiver room?
yeah, and like I guess that's fair. I just feel like Lamar Jackson had a great season. Like he had an MVP type season, even if he didn't
Oh
win
yeah.
MVP. And I think Isaiah Likely is going to step up in terms of he already did last year, but I think he's going to continue to get more reps and more opportunities, and that's going to be good. I don't know. I just feel like that they are a team that had Super Bowl expectations coming into last year. They fell short because they played bad. It wasn't a scheme thing. It wasn't this is a team that has a clear weakness. It was as simple as they got beat by the MVP. And
Yeah,
so for
I
them,
do think that, and again, for people who don't know, I'm a University of Louisville fan for my
yeah.
collegiate allegiances, so I'm obviously a Lamar guy. The Lamar playoff statistics are starting to mount up in a way that doesn't. They're not great. I mean, so you could say they played poorly. Who's they referring to? In a lot of ways, we could throw it on Mark Andrews for the drop. If Lamar doesn't have those two turnovers in the game, he doesn't play that poorly in the first half, then they walk out of Buffalo with a win.
Yeah. And that's entirely fair. It's just like, what is your solution in terms of your offseason moves to fix that? Like, again, you could say, oh, well, we have to get more weapons, but like, that was Lamar's fault. Like, he messed up. And so if he messed up,
Entirely fair. I think it's just one of those things to where if you go into a season for the second season in a row, I believe, if not maybe
Mhm.
the third, knowing that your wide receiver one is going to be Zay Flowers,
yeah,
I don't know.
true. He was a Pro Bowler last year. That doesn't really mean anything. I
Kind
don't
of,
know why I even said that.
kind of by default, maybe somewhat. Also,
Yeah.
the Pro Bowl's not really as meaningful to me
No.
as all pro.
Also,
The
he
Pro Bowl's
shouldn't
kind
have.
of a
It should have been
joke.
BTJ. It should have been Brian Thomas Jr.
That's the
But
real. That's what the people need to hear.
that's what I'm saying, dude. But anyway, basically, like when I look at the Ravens, they address their weaknesses in the secondary, which I think was their clearly most obvious, biggest weakness, and they stayed the same. And so I gave them like a B plus, A minus, anywhere within that range. I think makes sense, just because like we said, they didn't add those weapons, but like they're still going to be competitive. It really hurts me to say that they're probably going to win the division. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, they're probably going to win the division. They stayed competitive. They're going to be a top dog in the AFC. I'm sure Lamar Jackson is going to get better and better like he has every year in his career. So we'll see. But I thought that they had a fine offseason. Nothing really stood out. They had a great draft. They didn't do anything terrible. And so every move made sense. It pushed them in the direction they're going. And I think that, yeah, I think like an A minus, B plus makes a lot of sense.
Fair. I'll accept it.
Okay. I guess I can move on
Yeah.
to a team that I don't want to talk about, but I will. My team, the Cincinnati Bengals.
Why don't you want to talk about them, Adam?
Because I'm not going to like what I'm going to have to say. But if I'm being totally truthful, I'll just tell you right now, I gave them a D plus because I thought that this offseason was full of so much controversy that carried into the last 2 years. And I think what their front office is doing is absolutely ridiculous and makes no sense. I think it shows a lack
Go
of
off. This is your time.
yeah, like I think it just shows a lack of understanding about how contracts work. I think that they don't quite either they're just stupid or they're more broke than we can ever imagine. And either of those scenarios is not going to lead to a good grade. And so the reason I gave them a plus is because they did re-sign Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but it's like every good move that they did is surrounded by this cloud of context where it's like, why didn't you just sign him last year? Like, how much money would they have saved if they signed Jamar Chase last year when the freaking wide receiver market goes up 10 million per year? Like, it's absolutely ridiculous.
I know you named those as the two best moves of the offseason. I'd say only one of those are good. Obviously, re-signing Chase. I'm not on the signing T. Higgins side of things. I know we've had discussions about this
We have.
previously on our own time. I think that when you pay two wide receivers and obviously T. Higgins not making nearly as much as Chase, but if you pay two weapons that much money, the history of that is not the greatest.
Right. Well, and I think I've kind of gone back and forth when it comes to T. Higgins. Eventually, when it gets to a point where Jamar Chase says, we have the contract done, but if you don't sign him, I'm not signing.
Yeah,
That's when it gets to a point where it's like,
yes.
Okay. But
Which
what
is
makes
almost part of why that it makes it bad is that you as a front office let it boil up to a point
That's
where you were
exactly
basically
what my point is.
forced to do it. But
It's like, if 2 years ago, when you would have extended him, you would have been able to save so much money in the long run without creating this animosity. And what sucks about it too is just with all of these contract situations, we haven't even talked about Trey Hendrickson, is that once you get this, I guess, status as a cheap, broke team that isn't willing to give deals that are favorable to players, no one's going to want to sign with you. Remember the offseason after Joe Burrow had his breakout season, all of a sudden all these guys were like, oh, I'd love to play with Joe Burrow. I'd love to play with this guy. This is a quarterback I think will lead to winning. Like, all of a sudden we had all this opportunity to be able to sign a bunch of great players, but our front office is, again, either too stupid or too broke to actually do anything about it. And I think there's also an aspect where they're just stubborn. And eventually they fold like they did with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, or they won't, like I think they're going to do with Trey Hendrickson. And the worst part about it is they could have signed all three of those guys. 100% absolutely. If they would have signed Jamar Chase and T. Higgins when they were supposed to, we would have plenty of money left to sign Trey Hendrickson. And I will say, to give them a little bit of credit, they are their owners are the poorest owners in the NFL. It's a family business. It's the Brown family. That's okay. So what that means, though, in reality is they don't have the ability to, create the type of signing bonuses that other teams can create in order to save cap space. But even if that's the case, they still have enough cap room.
What they do reminds me of it's like Jerry Jones decision making, but they don't have Jerry Jones money. They don't.
Yeah.
they can't afford to mess around with these contracts. They don't have the financial wiggle room to be able to do that. They're not operating, and obviously it's a cap space sport, but this is perhaps the one ownership group that does not necessarily have the financial mobility to even fully utilize all of the cap, which means that you can't mess around with these things.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely ridiculous. It just makes me upset because it's like I'm a fan and I'm always gonna be a fan. But like, what do I do? Like, I think we still have a chance at winning a Super Bowl because Joe Burrow is that good. I think if we make it in the playoffs in a one-on-one situation where it's, one game to move on, that Joe Burrow and company can beat anybody. But we had the opportunity, especially what makes me mad about it is with the Chiefs' new dynasty and legacy of winning that they've created, they have created the blueprint for small market teams. Like they have showed the moves that you want to do, the guys that you want to draft, and when you get those guys, you extend them immediately. They've showed the ways that you can restructure contracts in order to
Or if
create
you
a
don't
favorable
extend them
cap space.
immediately, you move off. You don't
Exactly.
you don't franchise tag you make an actual, and this is, I don't want to use the D word that might scare off Bengals ownership. You have to make a decision. You actually have to decide whether, oh, I'm either signing this guy or I'm not signing this guy.
Right. And
It's that
so,
simple.
yeah, exactly. And so I guess we can get into like some of the team needs. It's all centered around defense and offensive line depth, like it's been
Yep.
for as long as I can remember. They need
Yeah.
they need a better edge rush. Obviously, with Trey Hendricks unsigned, that makes it even worse. They need help with their secondary, which I think they did some moves along the margins to kind of help that indirectly. And then obviously just offensive line depth. Last year, the Bengals' two guards, Alex Kappa and Cordell Volson, were the worst two starting guards in the NFL. So obviously that needs to be fixed. Some acquisitions, they didn't really pick up anyone of note, other than Samaje Perine. So that's cool. I like Samaje Perine. He's unironically been one of the most impactful players in terms of like AFC playoff games in the last like 4 years, which is really funny just because he moved around from the Bengals when they were competing and then to the Chiefs.
Yeah.
He had a small stint with the Broncos, but I don't know. Maybe
I mean,
maybe he'll work
he
his
had the
magic
game.
in Cincinnati.
He had the game icing play in
He did.
the
He
most
did.
recent AFC Championship game.
He did. Anyway, we signed T. Higgins and Jamar Chase to an egregious amount of money because we waited and sat on our hands like a bunch of idiots and cowards. And then the biggest coaching change was firing Lou Anarumo, which, I think it's a controversial move. Obviously, a change
The
had to be
Mahomes
made.
stopper.
Yeah, exactly. But and I've talked about this before, but Lou Anarumo's scheme is just incredibly complicated. And to be frank, I don't think that we had the personnel to be able to pull it off. Last year, I felt like a lot of times our secondary, it wasn't that they were necessarily getting beat egregiously, which they did. But I think the majority of the time, it was really just about a its defensive secondary that was just lost, that did not understand what was going on. Like, we have good pieces there, like Geno Stone, for example. But he just didn't seem like he understood what his assignment was oftentimes. And that led to problems. And so they brought in Al Golden. He was the DC of Notre Dame. He had a head coaching stint with Miami. And then obviously he was the linebackers coach for the Bengals whenever they did make it to the Super Bowl. I really, really like this pick. It's not necessarily from a scheme perspective because he doesn't run necessarily anything out of the ordinary or revolutionary, which I think is good considering our secondary is so young.
Yeah, that
but
might be a welcome change of pace.
I think that alone is going to make it so that's like, just you cover that guy. That's it. Like, we're not going to be doing any of these fancy things. And I'll actually be talking about Lou Anarumo's scheme more whenever we talk, when I go over the Colts. But I think that's good. And the thing that really sets Al Golden apart is he's a big culture guy, and he's huge when it comes to player development, which is exactly what the Bengals need. In the draft, one thing that surprised a lot of people is they didn't go after any secondary pieces. They didn't go after any players that play in the secondary. I thought that was okay because when you had a pass rush like we did last year, your secondary has no chance to be able to make a play. Like, these quarterbacks were throwing the ball.
If a quarterback has 6 seconds to be able to make a decision, no secondary is going to be able to hold up that well.
Exactly. And last year, it's telling, and this is why I'm really upset about the Trey Hendrickson situation. The Bengals across the board in every statistical category that you can pretty much think of were 32nd in the league without Trey Hendrickson on the field. It is absolutely ridiculous the impact that man made on that defense. And so, again, just re-sign him, stick to your word, make the moral choice, and sign this man before Joe Burrow has another, MVP type season and we miss the playoffs. Obviously, the other pick was in the first round, which is Shamar Stewart. Big ceiling guy. He scored a 10 out of 10 on the RAS, which is the relative athletic score. It's a score that analyzes basically all of the tests in the combine, and then takes into account position in order to create a score of how athletic you are. He had the highest score of any defensive end / edge rusher in the last 50 years. So he arguably might be the most athletic player in the draft. He only had 4 sacks in his college career. So this is clearly a pick where it's like his ceiling is crazy, but his floor is also incredibly low. Which kind of begs the question, which is something I've been thinking about and I think we could talk about, is, in later first rounds, or even in the early first round of the draft, or second round, should teams draft for floor, or should they draft for more of a ceiling play? What do you think, Jonathan?
It depends entirely on the position, in my opinion. I don't think that you should ever be drafting a quarterback in the first round, and even the second round, for floor.
Right.
Like you have to be drafting for ceiling there. I think with offensive line, you are drafting more so for floor, because the floor of a first round talent offensive lineman should be high enough to where it's not a sexy pick, but it's, for a team that's in a position to be able to do that, it's the correct pick. So when you're going for, I think, more so your skill position players, so your quarterbacks, your running backs, your wide receivers, in those early rounds, round 1 and early day 2, you're almost always drafting and should be for ceiling. You're never drafting a running back for the floor.
Right.
That early on. You're never drafting a quarterback for the floor that early on. So, but I think when you get into a level of, and it's also just the inherent nature of the guys who are that talented and that gifted to be able to be drafted that early, means almost inherently that you are drafting for the ceiling in most every scenario, because that's the vision that you see. It's the blue chip pick. It's why a first round draft pick is so valuable in the NFL, because and first round draft pick is, it's somewhat dependent on at what pick. Are we talking about number 1 or number 32?
Right.
But regardless, those first, and every draft class is different, but when you look at those first 32 picks, and even more so first 64 picks, you're drafting guys where you're not just hoping, oh, I think this guy could be a reliable starter for us, and maybe and we can sign him to a second contract. You're trying to sign a guy or draft a guy who's going to be a foundational piece of your roster for the next 10 years. That's the vision with a pick that high.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, in terms of, I don't know, quarterbacks are higher rounds, generally, or I guess higher picks in the first round, you would assume that the player has that mix of ceiling and floor, where you see the athletic ability and the traits that will translate to the NFL, but you also see a level of production that you can kind of lay your hat on and say, I think he can replicate this to a certain extent within the NFL, and so that kind of creates the floor for him. I like this move, I think. I've been thinking about it a lot. I like the pick. I think that he was a first round pick, according to I think he would have been taken in the first round if he wasn't taken by the Bengals. But I really, really like this pick in the context of Trey Hendrickson playing, because this is a guy that's going to need a mentor and specifically help with one particular trait, which is finishing the tackle, something that Trey Hendrickson arguably is the best at in terms of technique within the NFL for edge rushers. And he's going to be sitting on the sideline. And let's not even get into the fact that Shamar Stewart is also right now sitting on the sideline because they can't agree to a freaking contract, which it's the same issue over and over again.
Yeah.
But looking at the other picks, they got Dylan Fairchild. I really like this pick. He's a guard. He only gave up 1 sack in his last 2 seasons, which is 787 passing block snaps. Getting a guard from Georgia, I think makes a lot of sense. That's a good school to pick an offensive lineman from. Overall, it really just comes down to I think that their defense is going to get better because of their coordinator situation, but that is just dependent upon Trey Hendrickson. If he's not playing, I don't think it's going to get better. It might even get worse, and so that's why they get a D plus.
All right. Well, I will go ahead and take back over and finish off the last two teams of the AFC East.
Sounds
The
good.
next up is the Miami Dolphins. 8-9 last season. We will start off on, it's not even a positive note, but it's just kind of a fun statistical oddity of a note before we talk about how meh of an offseason this was. Last season, they were the 22nd overall offense. Surprisingly good defense, though, 10th overall. Do you want to know how many? We'll frame it in this way. Their offensive passing game put up 22 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. Their defense against the pass gave up 22 touchdowns while snagging 10 interceptions. Their offensive rushing game, 1,700 yards and 12 touchdowns. Their defense against the rush gave up 1,700 yards and 12 touchdowns.
They were so mid. They were the definition of mid.
It really, I was scrolling through the Pro Football Reference page, and it was so funny looking at it on the screen. I was like, these are just identical. Yes, no, perfectly mediocre. We can't talk about the Dolphins without talking about Tua Tagovailoa's health. Listen, he played 11 games last season, and he led the league in completion percentage. Put his statistics that he played, and I know the NFL is a small sample size sport, so you can't perfectly project. But put his 11 game statistics on a 17 game pace, and we're looking at 4,400 yards and 30 touchdowns. I am not a Tua believer, but that's because of everything almost outside of Tua's control. The most immediate thing being his health, and then the tangible aspects of his physical game with his arm strength and everything else that comes with that. I think as a quarterback, if he plays for a full season, Tua is always going to be, while he's in his quote unquote prime, an above average quarterback. The question is, how close are we talking between the 16th best quarterback and like the 8th best quarterback in the league? And the closer he can get to that fringe top 10, I think he is capable of. And that may sound shocking to a lot of people. I would question some people to do a quarterback ranking of their own. There's not a lot of talent in terms of like once you get outside of like the top 6, top 7 quarterbacks. You could throw a lot of guys into that 8 and between like that 8th, 9th, and 10th spot. It's up for grabs. So off season with their coaching, the only major change, they parted ways with their special teams coordinator, Danny Crossman, bring in Craig Aukerman. The only thing of note is, and it's not even necessarily his fault, I do think Mike McDaniels enters on a bit of not a hot seat, but a warm seat. And and I think Mike McDaniel is a coach that's good enough to have a long career elsewhere. I could easily see a version of this season playing out where he is gone by the end of this year. And I think that's something that should be talked about slightly more.
Yeah.
With their draft, I'll set this up by actually talking about where they're at, which is their best unit last season was probably their defensive line. Their draft, the bulk of their picks and quality picks were on the defensive line. So the rich get richer with
They were
that
doubling
unit,
down.
doubling down.
They said, "Here
But
goes one more for you."
but I mean, what tangible improvements can be made? I mean, they had one of the, I think, a top 5 run defense in the NFL last season. So, I mean, let's say they bump up from the 4th or 5th best to the 1st or 2nd. The tangible impact of that, I mean, they're adding guys like Kenneth Grant, interior defensive lineman from Michigan, great run defender, gets even better. You're looking at Jordan Phillips, interior defensive lineman from Maryland. He's a beast and a half. He's a physical freak. But again, you're putting this talent in a position, and you could say, yeah, you draft the best guy available. But at a certain point, you have to have a vision outside of this one unit.
Yeah.
And so here's where we'll note we are recording this on June 1st. This is the first day where it becomes financially feasible for the Dolphins to trade Jalen Ramsey. Because if they had traded him before today, they would have owed him like $9 million. If they trade him after today, they save $9 million. So it's like an $18 million draft, dead money swing, basically. So I don't know if he's going to be gone, but there's a high likelihood that he could be. If Jalen Ramsey is traded, the Dolphins' projected starting secondary, and I'm being generous with this. This is their best case. Storm Duck and Cam Smith at outside corner, Kadir Kahu at the nickel, and Ashton Davis and Ifeatu Melifonwu at safety. You don't have to be someone who scrapes through the all-22 to know that that's not a recipe for success. This is no offense to any name that I just listed. This could easily end up being the worst secondary in the NFL.
Yeah.
And they did nothing to besides, I think they drafted if they drafted a corner, it didn't make my highlights draft. The only other draft highlight that I noted is they spent a 7th round pick on Quinn Ewers out of Texas. So backup QB.
Let's go. They've never been more back.
Maybe Quinn Ewers is the solution here. If that's the real conversation.
That's what you're missing here, Jonathan.
That's the missing piece that I'm not putting together. Yeah. This is a C-. Maybe I'm too generous compared to you.
Yeah.
I probably could have put this as a D. The only reason I didn't in my mind put it down to a D is I can't fully disrespect the concept of drafting for talent, not just for need. Right. So if they drafted guys who are physical freaks who could make immediate impacts. So I'm not going to completely slam them for that. It's just that they didn't pair that with free agency moves to fill other holes. They just kind of sat there and did nothing and watched as they hemorrhaged talent on defense, which was their one surprisingly good unit last season, mainly due to their defensive line. Yeah. So it's an offseason that lacked any vision for me.
Right. Yeah, I think that's entirely fair. I think that makes sense. And it sucks too, just because I don't know. It makes you, and this is something that I've struggled, it's something I've thought about a lot, especially as I've gotten more and more into basketball specifically, and just that whole rebuilding situation, because the sample size in the NFL is so small and it's just such a different game. It's hard for you to really do a full-on rebuild, like you would in the NBA, where it's
well, especially because, and this is another thing,
get this pick. But
this is another thing I wanted to make a note of really quickly because it applies to rebuild. This is the first year of the Tua contract where they're actually getting hit for big money. So his contract hit is $40 million this year. Compare that to $10 million last year.
Right.
So
and maybe I don't know. Maybe it's a situation where you really can't do anything about it, but it's just you have to ask the question, can a Tua-led offense beat a divisional opponent like the Bills and Josh Allen? Because if your, greatest path towards the playoffs is winning that division, do you have the pieces right now to be able to get that done? And again, maybe it is a situation where they're just screwed until that contract is up, because I can't imagine Tua Tagovailoa would get that much in the open market. But it just kind of seems like they're going nowhere, and like they're not going to be competing for Super Bowls anytime soon. And so, where does that
There-
leave you as an organization?
There's a level to where Mike McDaniel, the biggest Tua compliment that I'll get and I give, and it's almost backhanded, not intentionally, is he is competent enough to execute a great offensive mind and its scheme. Like he is competent enough to be able to put the vision that Mike McDaniel has onto a football field. So
Yeah.
like that's why I thought it was interesting, and I still think what the Rams ended up doing, bringing back Stafford, is ultimately what their best case was. But it's why I was curious about hypothetical, and the money wouldn't work. There'd be other things. But in a hypothetical fairyland, if we can do that, where if you just fully swapped Tua and Matthew Stafford, I think that Sean McVay is probably the second most offensive, the second best offensive mind in the NFL outside of Andy Reid. And so I think that there are guys out there who, yeah, would they like better quarterbacks? But I think if Tua was on a slightly better contract than what he got paid, now looking back in hindsight, like if Tua was on a Baker Mayfield contract in this exact same situation, it doesn't excuse how terrible the Dolphins offseason was on the defensive side of things. But if you just removed that and looked at it purely offensively, I think that they would be looked at much more favorably. I think
Yeah.
it's because Tua got so much money, and
Yes.
then you throw all the health things in there, that is it financially feasible for a team to construct a roster around someone of that level of talent compared to that level of money?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, I think a C, maybe fringe D makes a lot of sense. With that in mind, I think we should play a little bit of game, do a little bit of clip and engagement farming, if you will.
Oh,
Let's
we got
play,
a clip farm, folks.
let's do a draft. Let's do a draft. And so
Okay.
I'm gonna try and get this up so that I can
I'm
type.
out of the, obviously, for all those listening, Adam's running all the games, so whatever he's throwing at me, who
Yeah.
knows?
So we're gonna do a little bit of draft, or a little draft. We're gonna, obviously, whenever we're talking about these grades for the off season, a big question within the off season is A, do you have your quarterback? And
Uh-huh.
B, do you have a plan to get that quarterback? And so we're going to be drafting the worst possible quarterback, uh, but we're going to be drafting starting quarterbacks in the AFC in order to create that. So basically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking an attribute from a starting quarterback in the AFC to add to our quarterbacks in order to try and
Okay.
create the worst one possible. And so we're going to do this snake draft style.
Okay.
And so you can see the categories are arm strength, accuracy, mobility, decision making, clutchness, and aura. And so, Jonathan,
Okay. All
do
right.
you want to start?
All right. So I'm drafting. Are there no repeats?
No repeats. No.
Okay. Between the both of us, or I just can't repeat my own pick?
Between the both of us, we can only draft one quarterback.
Okay. So when we get to and all right. All right. I have to go immediately. Accuracy, Anthony Richardson.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And by the way, guys, I'm very bad at spelling, so if I spell this wrong, I don't care.
He is.
All
That's
right,
a
so then I
fact.
get two picks now. So
Snake.
I'm
You
thinking
didn't
I'm
tell
gonna
me this
do.
was snake draft style.
I just
Okay.
said it was snake draft. What are you talking about? So for arm strength, I'm gonna go with Pickett, Kenny Pickett. And also, by the way, so there are going to be quarterback question marks related to like, is this player starting or not? For
Uh-huh.
some of the teams, like the Steelers, for example, just because it's like there's kind of a question mark there between Howard and Aaron Rodgers, or even maybe Mason Rudolph could shine his could stick his head out there, um, in that composition. But so I got Pickett for arm strength. And then I don't know where I want to go next. I think for decision making, I'm gonna go Fields. I think I spelled that wrong. I'm gonna go Justin Fields for
Justin
decision
Fields.
making.
Huh. I think, and so am I. And like you said, am I allowed to choose in
We'll
quarterback
have to
rooms
talk
where
about it, but yeah, I think most we'll mostly allow it.
could I go Dylan Gabriel for Aura?
I feel like there's no way he's gonna start.
Yeah,
But okay,
the news out of training camp has not been good for Dylan
no.
Gabriel.
But like, let's just say that all of the well, but the problem is if we picked all the Browns quarterbacks, those are the
We
top
could fill
picks
out
in
this
this
whole
draft,
list.
which has Browns quarterbacks.
Yeah, give me so now I'm up again, right?
Yeah.
Clutchness, mobility. Give me at this point in his career, Aaron Rodgers for mobility.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I'm changing.
Okay.
Joe Flacco for mobility.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. So now I have two picks. I'm immediately going to go with kind of a sleeper one, but I think honestly the best one, Justin Herbert for clutchness. Obviously, we have the two games or the two playoff games that come to mind against the Jaguars, but then
And
also
also, and I
against
know,
and
and
then also
people always
last
say
year.
like it's a small sample size. Really, when we say, and I know it's not official, it's not going to go down in the record books as a playoff game. He's really had three playoff games because you remember the last week of the season game, Chargers, Raiders, where if they tied, they would both get in. It was a de facto win and you're in for both teams, and he stunk it up that game. So yeah, across the board in any playoff game or de facto playoff game, Herbert, yeah, I agree
He
with
has
you.
not been the best in, clutch moments. And then I'm trying to decide what I want to do here, but I think I'm going to go mobility. And surprisingly, when you look across the board, there are some pretty good. They're like most quarterbacks, like you actually look at it and it's like they're kind of sneaky athletic. Like maybe they can actually escape a tackle or two. So
Mhm.
I think I'm just gonna kind of do what you did and do Rodgers for mobility.
Fair. Um,
This is hard though because like I don't know. I feel like the AFC has lot more like just better quarterbacks starting.
yeah, I'm gonna go for arm strength. I gotta go Tua. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the move.
It's
Okay,
tough.
one more pick.
Um, Clutchness. Who could I go with here? We've already got a lot of the names off the board.
Yeah, like all the like really like just subpar mediocre quarterbacks are kind of taken.
Who else is left for me to go through?
I'm
I'm
not
running
telling you,
through
you
some
gotta figure it
teams.
out. We gotta hurry up. We gotta keep the pace moving. We gotta keep it pushing here.
Decision making. Um, mm, can I go? Um, no, he's good. Clutchness.
You're just thinking of all the good quarterbacks.
I guess clutchness. Geno Smith.
Sure. I don't know about that. I feel like there's one more quarterback that
Who am I
makes
missing?
a lot of sense.
Who am I
I'm about to
blanking?
take, which this is controversial, and maybe there are other quarterbacks. No, actually, I was going to say Lamar Jackson for accuracy, but I feel like he's gotten a lot better. That's who I was thinking you could say with clutchness just because of the playoff numbers. Um,
Yeah,
but I think for accuracy, instead, I'm going to be going with Allen. Even though, like, I know, like, obviously he was better last year, but if we're talking about the entirety of his career, he's kind of a loose cannon when it comes to his accuracy and just the amount of interceptions that he's had. And then for Aura, this one's kind of hard,
yeah.
but
You left a lot of. Uh, you're gonna pick someone who might have a bit of aura. You might
yeah,
have
I
built a
can't really.
quarterback that has some aura.
Dang it, I can't escape it, man. Like, there's nothing I can do. Looking at the list, I'm thinking my best option is just gonna be Trevor Lawrence, just because like last year
That's who I
was
should have had.
yeah, just because like last year he just took such a hit. I felt like last year was his final year of people being like, "Come on, he has what it takes. He has it in him." But, you know, it obviously didn't work out.
Entirely fair. All right. So for decision making, who do I have left to choose from?
There's a lot there. I think there's a lot of good options left for decision making.
What if I went with? Are we allowed? So we're allowed to draft rookies.
Yeah.
Uh, what if I go? I mean, I don't want to be too harsh, but it's kind of the one criticism of him at a lot of points
Let me
throughout his
guess.
collegiate career.
This or
Yeah, Cam
yeah.
Ward.
No, that's totally fair. Okay, so then for those of you who are potentially listening on audio platforms, for me, the worst quarterback that I drafted, which is obviously way worse than Jonathan's, for arm strength, I had Kenny Pickett. For accuracy, I had Josh Allen. For mobility, I had Aaron Rodgers. Decision making, Justin Fields. Clutchness, Herbert. Aura, Trevor Lawrence.
See, I think I clearly won this. I think with the arm
No.
strength of Tua, the accuracy of Anthony Richardson, we've
That's
got
a good one. That's a
Joe
good
Flacco's
one.
mobility, the decision making of Cam Ward, which is just a question mark, Geno Smith's clutchness, that's probably the toughest one, and then Dylan Gabriel's aura.
Yeah, you might have built Carson Wentz last year for the Chiefs.
I might have. Oh my goodness. Okay.
That
Yeah.
was fun.
Those
That
are
was a
some
good one.
atrocious quarterbacks.
Those are pretty. I think we overall did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
So let's move straight into the next team that I'm gonna slander because that's really all this is.
Well, wait. Why don't I? I'm one pick away from rounding out the AFC East.
Oh, okay, we can go into it. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's finish up the AFC East for all
Sounds
my.
good.
I don't want to keep the Bills fans waiting. Let's talk about the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah. Okay.
And also, I just, get to bask in last season. 13-4, really 13-3, meaningless, rested everyone, and actually, in a lot of ways, screwed over the Patriots. I mean, they still had a good offseason, but still, losing the AFC Championship game. Their season-long statistics, they had the second best offense in the league with a defense that I believe was 11th overall. And for reference, they're not the most advanced metrics. I'm just going off of points per game here. Josh Allen finally won an MVP in what was ironically probably the third best season of his career. Statistically, just looking at the regular season.
Right.
They lose to Mahomes and the Chiefs for the fourth time in 5 years in the playoffs. That's the most that, and this isn't just an opinion. It literally is the most that a team has been owned by another team in the playoffs in NFL history. No team has ever been 4-0. No, no quarterback has ever been 4-0 against another team at any point. That's never happened.
That's so
So that's where
crazy.
we're at right now. Now, I will say, ironically, last season was when the Bills hype train sort of died at the beginning of the season, and I was actually quite high on them. I do think that the two best teams in the AFC played in Arrowhead in the AFC championship game. So that's where we're at heading into this offseason. Coaching change, the only thing is that Chris Tabor is in as the new special teams coordinator. I do think, and I almost hope that they don't start asking the question because it's worked out quite nicely for us. The question about Sean McDermott has to be
Uh,
asked at some point. And listen, at what point does a defensive head coach whose unit consistently is the weak link that allows you to lose in the playoffs get fired? Like, that's the thing. He's a defensive head coach. It's not like it's an Andy Reid
uh,
situation or a Sean McVay situation with stat. He's a defensive head coach, so it's not like you'd be taking away Josh Allen's guru, mentor,
Right.
mastermind. And it's his unit that's consistently, for the most part, I think. I don't think that there's a single loss out there that you could blame Josh Allen more than the defense for. Now, I
Right.
think that some Bills fans get a little bit too defensive of Josh Allen and say it's the defense that utterly sells every single time. Like, at the end of the day, 2 years ago in the divisional round at Buffalo, Josh Allen has the ball in his hand, only needing a field goal. And yeah, he gets him into the field goal range and they miss the field goal, but that's all he can do. AFC Championship game last year, down by a field goal. You have 3 minutes and 14 seconds, I think. Plenty of time to drive the length of the field to not just get a field goal, but to get a touchdown and win the game, and you pick up one first down. So I do think that sometimes people overhype how much the defense has sold in the playoffs, but that doesn't mean that the question doesn't need to be asked about Sean McDermott.
uh,
That being said, their draft. Start off with Maxwell Harrison, cornerback out of the University of Kentucky. Look, I'm a Louisville fan, so I've got opinions about Kentucky, but I watched this guy play a lot as a result of him being at Kentucky. Definitely a potential stud. You draft TJ Sanders, a guy who, as a defensive tackle out of South Carolina, he put up numbers while getting double teamed most of the time, and that's in the SEC. So they spent a good overall way to look at this draft is the fact that they spent their second, third, and fourth rounders on the defensive line. And as compared to the Dolphins going all in on the defensive line, it was an actual need for a Bills, not their best unit. So another way to look at that, though, is that they only spent draft picks, a fifth round pick on a tight end, Jackson Hawes, and seventh round wide receiver, Caden Prather. So another way to look at this is, while they didn't really do much to help improve Josh Allen's weaponry. But I also think that Josh Allen is at the point of his career, he's smack dab in the middle of his prime. Uh, Maybe I don't think it's necessarily that you could punish the Bills front office for saying, hey, we have a limited amount of draft capital and a limited amount of cap space financially. Do we need to prioritize more? Getting weapons for Josh Allen or elevating the defense? Well,
right.
we know that
Well,
Josh Allen is going to elevate his weapons, so we kind of have to prioritize defense.
and I think that they're going to have. I think that Keon Coleman might potentially take a step up. I think that Dalton Kincaid might even, take another step. I think that James White is going to continue to be a good weapon, not just as a running back, but out of the backfield catching the ball. So I feel
Oh,
like they kind of already
James
have
Cook is
those pieces. That's
fantastic.
what I meant. What did I say? James White, James Cook. I think is, yeah, I think he's going to be good. So I don't know. I'm kind of with you. I think that it makes more sense to focus on the defense.
Yeah. And the free agency, they maintained the core. That's the most important part of their free agency. They had a lot of guys they needed to sign and extend, and they extended Greg Rousseau, Terrell Bernard, Christian Benford, Khalil Shakir, and obviously Josh Allen. The Khalil Shakir contract might be the best financial move of the offseason. They signed Khalil Shakir to 4 years at $13 million per year.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is definitely a budget
That's value
saver.
right there.
Yeah, that
So
is.
the worst part of their offseason is Taylor Rapp and DeMar Hamlin as a safety duo received the 31st out of 32 ranked coverage grade by PFF. Both of those guys are going to be the presumed starters week 1 for the Bills. So I
Yeah.
do have questions about the back end of the secondary, but in every other aspect, I had a hard time between the draft and what they were able to do with their limited financial freedom, being able to extend these guys, some of them with some real value, to not give them ultimately an A minus. I
Yeah.
liked this offseason. I liked the draft. Really, the only thing bringing it down was not improving the back end of that secondary, and maybe they could have spent a little bit more draft capital on bringing in a new fun weapon for Josh Allen. That's about it. It's still an A
Yeah.
minus. It's a
Yeah,
good
no.
offseason.
It sounds exactly like what the Ravens did, where it's like they had some clear weaknesses in their secondary. They had to
Yeah.
make a choice. Are we going to prioritize the weapons for Lamar Jackson, or are we going to stick with the guys we already have that have promise? And they made the exact same choice. I gave them the exact same grade. So it seems like they were contenders that stayed contenders. Let's move on to a team that did really bad. I'm going to talk about the Cleveland Browns, who have just continued their history of epic suckingness.
I'm excited
So
for this.
yeah, so the Cleveland Browns, obviously last year, they were coming off a season where they made the playoffs. They inevitably lost to CJ Stroud and the Texans, but they did it. They made the playoffs with Joe Flacco, none less, and they were anchored by one of the best, if not the best, defense in the NFL in the regular season. Last year, they come in all excited about, the man who should not be named at their quarterback, hoping that maybe he can finally bring new life into this offense.
Diddy
He got
Watson.
hurt twice. Yeah. Yeah, he got hurt twice. He tore his Achilles and then he did it another time, which is still crazy to think about. And even when he was on the field, he was really, really like historically bad for that team. There was this, I think they set a record. It was like 36 third down conversions that they didn't convert on in a row at some point last season with Deshaun Watson at the helm. So pretty horrendous.
You're joking. There's
I'm
no
pretty
way
sure that's
real.
the number. I'm pretty sure
There's
that's the
no
number.
way that's real. What?
Maybe we'll have to fact check it. While I'm talking,
The
you can
fact
Google it,
that I know
Jonathan.
I'm saying that there's no way that's real. The fact that it is even slightly believable is insane. I don't
Yeah,
care.
no.
We don't need to fact check it. That's
Yeah.
wild.
So they obviously need a quarterback. They lost Nick Chubb, so they need a running back. They needed some help with the interior D line, and they kind of made that up within the draft with Mason Graham, who I thought was a good pick. And then their cap situation is just still screwed from the Deshaun Watson trade and making him the highest quarterback in the NFL at that point. So, what did they do to address this? Not really anything. Like I said, I liked their first pick, Mason Graham. I think that makes sense to pair him with Myles Garrett. But in terms of the rest of the draft, they got, Dylan Gabriel in the third round, Shador Sanders 2 rounds later. And I'm not going to come up here and say anything extreme about Shador Sanders on either end. I don't think he's going to necessarily be like this Hall of Fame elite quarterback. I don't think he's going to be a quarterback that's worthy of a 5th-round pick. I think he's going to be a solid starter that is going to earn a starting position in the second contract. And I think eventually he will start for the Cleveland Browns. But if I'm a team like the Cleveland Browns, and I was thinking about it, they've had so many home run swings at quarterback that haven't worked out. maybe their plan was just like, maybe instead of getting a first overall quarterback, we're going to get 2 back-end quarterbacks and see if that works. Because we've tried the other thing before, and it didn't work out. But
I respect your attempt to make it sound like a reasonable move.
That's the only logic there is. The more far likely situation is that they're a dysfunctional organization that doesn't really know what they're doing at the quarterback position, which I think history would show.
Let me correct you. You could have ended that sentence after doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Just end it there.
That's it. They just don't know what they're doing. And that's, we need a Browns. Every major sports league needs a Brown organization. And so,
I disagree with that. I think the NFL,
Okay.
I think the NFL is the only league that is entertaining enough to make a team like the Browns work. Like, I don't know. Like,
I know what you mean.
They're monumentally bad.
But I think that's what it is, though. Is not like they're bad and they're boring. Like, they're bad and they try really hard to be good. And that's what's so funny about it. Anyway, all that being said, they re-signed Myles Garrett after a really funny contract situation where he was like, I'm not going to sign. And they were like, please? And he was like, trade me. And they were like, no. And they was like, all right, fine, pay me $40 million a year. And they were like, okay. But what's funny about that...
And he also, it's really funny from the PR standpoint, because he writes the open letter and is like, I just don't think that I could win here. And all of a sudden they throw an extra like $8 million a year on the table. And he's like, man, I know that this franchise is the right choice.
Right. And, to be honest with you, I don't really like the re-signing. First off, it's $40 million a year. It's a 6-year contract. So he's going to be like 34, 35 by the time this contract is over. Here's the other thing that's really funny about it. And this is what I think eventually got him to sign. They added a no trade clause within the contract.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't know,
not a lot of people talked about that.
A no trade clause does not mean he can never be traded. It means the only way he can be traded is if he decides where he goes. He can essentially veto every single trade option that they present him. Here's what I predict is going to happen in the next 1 to 3 years. He's going to be tired of it after he got his bag. He's going to want to win some championships. And so he's going to leak to Adam Schefter, or whoever it is, that these are the 3 championship teams that I'm willing to go to. And now, all of a sudden, the Browns have zero leverage to get all of the assets that they could from a trade for Myles Garrett. Like, basically what they did was they completely took away all of the leverage they could possibly have to trade him in the future, on top of the fact that they paid him so much money for such a long contract. Like, it seems like they're probably just stuck with it unless they're willing to just take the L, bite the bullet, and trade him to a team that, the almighty Myles Garrett says is okay with him. It's just crazy to like not just to re-sign him and make him and pay him so much money, but to give him so much power within his contract and within his trade destination. This is nothing against Myles Garrett. I think it's a smart move. I think it's really good. And I'm sure his agent was like, let's see if they go for this, because this would be really awesome for us. Like, this is even better than, getting traded now. Now we get the guaranteed money that we want, and we can decide our future.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But... so it's like, even the good thing they did, which you would think is good, like, this is a franchise piece. They drafted him first overall. He's consistently the best, if not, top 2 defensive or edge rusher in the NFL. And even this re-signing, they fumbled the bag.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, it just seems just like they're just destined to not do well. And again, like, this isn't even talking about, there's just so much to talk about. The other thing, too, is that their offense didn't necessarily get any better. I like the Keyshawn Judkins pick. I think that it's going to be a really good replacement for Nick Chubb, and I think he's going to be good. But last year, and this is what's crazy, they had one of the worst offenses in the NFL last season, obviously. Here are some stats. They were 30th in total yards, 22nd in passing yards, 29th in rushing yards, 32nd in scoring, 28th in red zone efficiency, and 32nd on third down. There was not a single aspect of that offense that was successful in any way. And they did nothing to say like, oh, we're going to get better. They didn't take any moves to be like, this is going to be better than last year. You could say that their quarterback play is going to be better. Fair. But I just don't think it's going to be enough. And I think that these rookie quarterbacks are in the worst situations that they can be in because they're in because of this Browns organization. Stefanski is their play caller. He's still their head coach. So I don't see any schematically why this offense would improve significantly. I gave them a D. I felt like they are bad and they're still going to be bad. And not only are they still going to be bad, but they're not going to have a direction. And what's funny is, let's say hypothetically, Arch Manning becomes available, or let's just say whoever it is, right? Like whether it's Drew Aller or Arch Manning, whoever that top quarterback is, right, next year in the draft, they could realistically get the first overall pick. Do they take a quarterback?
I think you have to. If you didn't take if because neither of the quarterbacks were first round picks, or like early second round picks, I don't think that no, you don't owe it to them. You don't owe it to Dylan Gabriel or Shadur Sanders to develop them and see before you take a chance on a blue chip quarterback prospect. No.
Yeah. I think the best thing that they could do, and the thing is, what I think is going to happen, which would be really stupid, is I think they're going to start by starting Kenny Pickett, which doesn't make any sense. Because, I get the concept of, oh, we're going to draft a young guy and he's going to have veteran leadership. But when your veteran leadership is Joe Flacco in probably the last season of his career and Kenny Pickett, that's not inspiring. That does not move me. And on top of that, what you have to do is you have to pick the best rookie from camps and you have to start one of them. Either it's Gabriel or it's Sanders, and just let him go through the fire and develop under that pressure and hope that he can be better for it. And if he's really, really good and you still, even if he's good, you're still probably not going to be good. You might be able to get a quarterback next year. Yeah. And if he's good, then he has trade value all of a sudden. The worst thing you could do is let them sit on the bench, not gain any trade value, be terrible still, and then draft a quarterback. That's what I think might happen. And, even if that doesn't happen, it's still a D for their offseason.
I'm right there with you. I agree. 100% on everything you said.
Okay. Well, I want to do a team that I can have a good grade with, but I'm just going to finish off the AFC North by talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Pittsburgh Steelers last year, obviously offense was the issue. It has been for the past 5 years now, it seems like. They went 10-7 last year, par for the course. They did what they always did. Their biggest weakness is their offense just still remains outdated and complacent. I feel like they didn't necessarily make any moves to improve that, but last year their offense was their issue, especially at the end of the season. Because if you remember, they actually started off pretty hot. They started off competing with the Ravens for that division, but at the end of the season it all crumbled, and it was largely due to a stagnant offense.
A lot of that was due to a backloaded schedule.
True, that's true.
It was a pretty soft schedule up front.
That's true. They also are missing explosive playmakers. I think that Pickens is good, but he just was not there last season, to be honest.
No.
I don't think it was necessarily a situation where it was about a skill set. I think it was about an attitude. I just don't think he enjoyed being a Pittsburgh Steeler. And I think that's why they eventually traded him. So to fix that, they obviously brought in DK. I think that's a fine move. It doesn't necessarily move the needle for me. But I think the biggest thing when you're looking at the Steelers, and this is kind of what I was talking about before with grading on a curve and kind of understanding what the direction is for this team, their floor is 9 to 10 games winning every year. That's the floor that Mike Tomlin gives them. Now I think it's on the front office in order to make moves in order to elevate that ceiling. I think that the front office is clearly creating and establishing a ceiling for this team. and Mike Tomlin is creating a floor. What's crazy about this is that they don't. I like in Steelers fandom. I feel like there's a lot of Steelers fans talking about how we not need to get rid of Tomlin, how we need a new direction for a coach. It's not working out. We can't win in the playoffs, whatever. I think that's just utterly ridiculous. I think that when you have a coach who has a floor of 9 to 10 games, a smart front office should be able to have them like if he gave them the roster in order to elevate this team, like all of a sudden you'd be looking at a team that is consistently great instead of consistently mediocre. Like,
Yeah.
I do not blame this on Tomlin. I think that Tomlin, having a head coach with a floor of 9 to 10 wins is incredibly rare, but also incredibly just like awesome from a team building perspective. And the
Yeah.
fact that they've wasted it for this long, I think is more on the front office. Other acquisitions include, Bobby Trees. Cool. They got Darius Slay. Cool. They traded George Pickens. Good. That makes a lot of sense. Like I said before, they didn't make really any coaching changes of note. But the one thing I will say is that they retained Arthur Smith. And if there is someone on this coaching staff you want to get rid of, it's Arthur Smith. He just has a offense that is very traditional, very based in the run game, and just does not work against the new adapted defenses within the modern NFL. Here's a stat for you. In the last 3 seasons, or no, his offense is ranked bottom 10 in scoring in the last 3 of 4 seasons. Again, bottom 10 in scoring for the past 3 and 4 years. Like, that alone should tell you that this is not an offensive coordinator that should be leading a unit within the NFL currently. And there's nothing against him. I just think that his offensive scheme is, again, outdated and isn't, like, I think that defenses are able to adapt with it. And not to get too technical, part of the reason why that's the case is because I think coordinators are able to stack the box more against the run because defenders, especially secondary pieces, are getting just faster and more athletic to be able to make, to make up for the risk that comes with stacking the box. That's something that the Vikings did a lot last year and Fangio did with the Eagles. So basically it's this concept of we can go all out for the run because we have guys that are fast enough and quick enough to make up for it if it's a pass. And so it makes it so that this traditional hard-nosed running scheme that Arthur Smith runs isn't as effective against a lot of defenses. And so I think that that's someone you can move on from, especially because Tomlin is obviously a defensive-oriented guy. I think that's where his floor comes from. So really, when I look at the Steelers, I give them a D. And it's kind of like what I said before. It's not necessarily that they made any egregious moves. I think it's just the fact that they're sticking to the mediocrity that has defined this era of Steelers football.
You're just giving D's everywhere, aren't you?
I really am. And like, that's why we were talking about this before. I felt like I was being too harsh. I guess you could say C, but in my mind, C is average. And this was not an average offseason. Like, this was an offseason where they had the opportunity to be able to, maybe make moves or at least put them in the direction where they can compete with the top end talent within the AFC. But here's what I think is going to happen again. I think they're going to be 9-8, 10-7. Maybe they'll sneak their way in the playoffs. They're going to be the 7th or 6th seed. And because of that, they're going to be playing one of the top 3 teams in the AFC. And they're going to get beat again in the first round. And so...
Yeah, and this may not be well, it could be a hot take, but it's more so, it's a bit of a worn out take because it feels like people have said this, not me, but people have always said this of like the last 5 years of Steelers football, but I'm officially now staking my claim, and I think this might be Tomlin's first below 500 season.
Maybe.
I have a hard time imagining this team getting to 9 wins. And I know we've almost avoided the Aaron Rodgers conversation.
Yeah, like
when talking about the Steelers.
Say.
I don't. That doesn't really affect it for me. That doesn't move the needle because, and I know that sounds crazy talking about moving the needle from, whatever your quarterback is going to be prior to adding Aaron Rodgers, but we have to keep this in the context of Aaron Rodgers hasn't played above average football in 4 seasons, and there's a lot of other baggage that he brings with to them. And I know Tomlin is a coach who can deal with that baggage, but there's a limit to his powers. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I think you're right. That wouldn't necessarily shock me, but also if they did end up winning like 9 to 10 games, that also wouldn't shock me. If that's just because of historical precedent, like he's done it so much that it seems like it's within the realm of possibility.
Well, now that we've finished our AFC East and AFC North breakdowns, I know, Adam, you have a couple more games prepared for me, for us both to play, but these will be a bit of a surprise for me. So
Yeah,
lay it
it's
on me,
gonna be
pal.
fun.
Let's do some clip farming. Let's clip farm, as the kids say.
Let's do it. So, what we're going to be doing next is, obviously when talking about off seasons, a big part of that, and I think probably the majority of what we talked about today was examining the draft and kind of seeing the new young guys that they picked up. And obviously the draft is a big moment for these players. You know, basically going into the NFL, fulfilling their dreams and doing something other than like a regular job that you would expect of an average Joe to do. And so what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you pictures of NFL rookies, and I want you to tell me what job you think they would do if they weren't drafted.
Okay. All right. I'm here for it.
So first up, we got Will Campbell. I love the pictures that I picked.
Will is undoubtedly in another lifetime a I mean, if you took like 30 pounds off of him, that's a state trooper right there.
You think law
That's
enforcement?
Yeah, you take 30 pounds off of him, give him a buzz cut, and you're looking at someone who's going to write you a ticket for going 5 over.
He's destined to serve and defend.
Yes.
Whether it's on the
That's
field or not. That's what he's
Yeah, exactly.
doing.
That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it.
I don't
I
know.
mean
I
that
just see him.
complimentary.
I feel like he's just like a used car salesman for some reason. I'm getting that vibe from him. Or just like some sort of salesman, just like kind of walking around. He has like, a long sleeve shirt, has like the emblem of the company logo.
Oh
And
yeah.
he's just,
Oh yeah.
he's just putting in the work, putting in the hours. He's the grind never stops kind of guy. He's constantly chasing a bag and stacking his bread.
Okay. There we go, Will. Attaboy.
Alrighty. Next we got Cam Ward.
Cam Ward.
So for some reason, when I see Cam Ward, I immediately think like mailman. Like I can just imagine him walking around like suburbia with like short shorts and knee-high socks, like running away from dogs.
Yeah, you got me there. I think
I don't
no,
know.
I see the vision that you're promoting. Yeah, mailman. Someone who is going maybe like a plumber. Someone going door to
Yeah,
door around a neighborhood.
yeah, yeah, and that's nothing against him. That is not an insult.
No.
Respect our mailmen. It's a job that has to be done and needs to be done.
They serve and protect.
The U.S. Postal Service. But yeah, that's what I'm kind of
This
thinking
is a
for
show
Cam
that
Ward.
supports USPS. We're anti UPS. We are anti Amazon. Down with FedEx. We believe in the United States Postal Service on this
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah. We definitely we're against the privatization of
Of mail.
mail. Next, we got Tyler Warren.
I know we're doing an actual job. He just looks like a lacrosse player.
He does.
This guy, he is absolutely in another life. Man, he's a political consultant.
Yes,
He
I could
is,
see it.
yeah, He's an outside consultant for political campaigns. And
He's
as
whispering in
someone
the
who,
ear of politicians.
yeah, but like
He's the
mid level. Like he's not cream of the crop. Like this guy, he's enough to be a consultant. He's not doing the door to door knocking, and he's not making cold calls.
Mm.
But
He is in the ear of every city councilman in Indianapolis.
yep, there we go.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Next we got Jahad Campbell.
I like this is a good photo. He's got like
It
the
is a
slight
good photo of
grin
him.
going. I like this. This guy is 100. This guy looks. What career am I thinking?
I don't know. I feel like professional for sure. Well, maybe not. Maybe he's like a bartender or like a
Oh,
barista, but he's like
what
but
a
everyone loves
crazy
him.
poll.
Maybe
If
like
Jahad
everyone
Campbell was
likes him.
serving me a drink at a bar, this guy Campbell looks like someone you could talk to.
Yeah,
Like
just
at
like a
bar, I
shoulder
like that.
to cry
I
on.
like
Just
that.
like someone that you just pour your woes into as you sip your drink. That's
Yeah.
that's what I think.
That's
He
a
just
good
looks like
poll.
someone you could talk to that could listen to you,
Yeah, another friendly face.
Yeah. All right. I think last up we got Tet McMillan.
Ted McMillan. Ted McMillan is making my sandwich at Subway.
We had to go there.
Ted McMillan is every Subway worker that you've ever seen blended into one. If you did a face merge of all Subway sandwich employees, it
be
would
Tet
churn
McMillan.
out Ted McMillan.
I don't know, man. I'm thinking more like maybe like an interior designer.
You're just making stuff up at this point. That's not the face. All love to. I mean,
dude.
it's not just
Maybe like a real estate agent.
He was drafted in the NFL. He's living out his passion in his career, but that's not the face of an interior designer,
I
Adam.
don't know. I'd let him design my house. He'd hit me up, dude. Perfect accent
Maybe.
pieces, like
Ted McMillan, friend of the show.
friend of the show, Tet McMillan. He actually designed our studios. Is what you don't realize. This is
Yeah, it's
actually
an inside
personal.
joke.
Yeah, you don't get it. Alrighty. Okay.
That was
Okay,
good
one
for
more
me. I
game.
needed that.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a good one. That'd be funny. One more game we're gonna play. Not really a game, just
One
something
more
to talk
game?
about. I know.
Holy
It's not really a
cow.
game. I lied. It's more just something fun to talk about.
Ew, I hate
So-
talking.
All right. I think every single year within the draft, it seems like, there are players that obviously year one do really good. Then there are some players that have more of a rocky start but end up doing really good. Then there are some players who have a rocky start, a rocky middle, and they get cut. And so today we're going to be looking at some of those players that had a lot of hopes coming into the draft, or maybe just haven't had the opportunity to do well. And we're going to be asking the question, do we think they're going to be a breakout or a bust? So I'm going to be naming a player, Jonathan, and I want us to talk about this. Do you think this player will be a breakout or a bust next season? First up, we got Anthony Richardson.
Bust.
Yeah.
I didn't even have
Without
to process
hesitation.
that. Yeah, I didn't even have to process that question. That there's a limit to how much the physical nature of the game, your height, your arm
Yeah.
strength, your speed, just pure athleticism. Anthony Richardson kind of put an end to that conversation because it was sort of Josh Allen that started that, drafting purely for the physicals and developing it. And we reached a boiling over point of drafting Anthony Richardson, third overall? And here
Yeah.
we are now.
Yeah.
No, I just don't see the vision. I can't.
It's
at
it's
this
tough. Last year he had 8 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and I think what makes it even worse is the fact that he gets injured every year. And that goes back to college and high school. He just consistently gets injured. He even when he plays, you don't really see, obviously there are those moments or those plays. Like arguably last year, he had the best pass of anyone in the NFL.
Yep.
But like when you look at it cumulatively and have like a larger sample size,
Yeah.
last year in those 11 games, he had a 61.6 passer rating, 1,800 yards, 8 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. It just
His
doesn't move the needle.
his completions percentage was like 47%.
Yeah, it's just not
It
anything
can't.
that like leads you to believe that there's hope.
No, I am
Okay.
sorry.
Well, sorry about that, Anthony Richardson. But next we're going to be talking about Jaden Hicks. This is a guy that you should be familiar with, Jonathan.
I am. And Jaden Hicks was actually the draft pick last season that I was behind Kingsley Suamataia, which didn't pan out entirely, although they're going to be transitioning him to guard. So
We'll see.
I think we'll see how that goes. Jaden Hicks was the pick that I was the most excited about. He hits like a train. He hits like
He
an
really
absolute.
does. He really does.
There are words that I can't say that I wish I could use to describe
He
how
messes
much of
people
a
up.
physical force Jaden
Yeah.
Hicks is to playing the position on the field that he does. The reason that I would believe and I would say a breakout is certainly more likely than a bust is because, and it's almost something to where, I mean, this is a compliment. It's not even because of him. It's because how much I trust Steve Spagnuolo and just the Chiefs in general developing players in the secondary.
Yeah.
They just have such a track record. I don't want to come off like a homer as a Chiefs fan, but they just objectively have the track record of doing it with guys that I can't say that it's more likely he's a bust than a breakout season.
Well, I think when it comes to the Chiefs, and we talked about this a little bit before when I was talking about the Bengals and the blueprint in terms of like how do you create teams that can sustain winning for so many
Mhm.
years. They basically what they decided to do is they picked their guys, right? They picked Patrick Mahomes and they kept stuck with him. They picked Travis Kelce. They picked, now they're picking Creed Humphrey. They picked Chris Jones. And some of the guys they said, this isn't going to work out. They traded Tooney. They traded Tyreek Hill. But
Yeah.
but the thing that they did that they consistently do is they say we are going to live within this certain unit on the field. We're going to primarily fulfill the needs that we have of this unit within the draft. And secondary, I think, is the greatest example of that, where, they just fall into and get Trent McDuffie and turn him into, top 5 corner at the, like at least. Like,
Yeah, I,
this is
I
just
mean, I think it's, yeah, I think he's pushing
top
on
3,
that top
maybe.
3 category for
Yeah.
sure.
So basically, my point is just to say that the Chiefs have had a track record of being able to supplement this position group with really, really good players through the draft. And I don't see a reason why they wouldn't be able to do that after, Jordan Reed left and he's kind of their
100%.
replacement. All right. Next, we got Trevor Lawrence. Breakout or bust?
I think I have to go. I think I got to go bust.
Yeah.
I think I have to give up on Trevor Lawrence. I think it's time. I think at a certain point, the league flies by you if you don't maintain pace. And so I think, and that's not even necessarily to say just for reference. This doesn't mean I think he'll have an even worse season than he did last year. It just
Yeah.
means that I don't see. There's faint hope for me to believe that he can return to the quarterback that at one point led a 4 possession comeback and played. Now, Mahomes, that was the season where he rolled his ankle very badly. So you
Yeah.
have to take that into the context. He did that in that Jaguars game, like in the divisional round, but played the Chiefs closely in that divisional round. I think it's far more likely that we get a version closer to last season than quote unquote peak Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah. This is a tough one too, because I felt like he already had his breakout season in the season that you're referring to. And
Yeah.
I think that I tend to
Well, to
go
remember
towards
contextually, it was kind of a breakout half season, really
true,
only the second
true,
half.
true. But I think that for him, you also have to take into account like he was the first overall pick. And so like what does that mean? Like for him to have a breakout season. For me, that means that he's gonna definitively be an elite quarterback. And whatever that means to you. And so when I'm looking at Trevor Lawrence, I think that next year is his best opportunity. I think Liam Cohen is going to be able to maximize him to his fullest extent. And
I like
whatever
Liam
he
Cohen. I like that hiring.
I love that hire. We'll talk about it in later episodes, but I love that hire. And so basically when it comes to Trevor Lawrence, I think that next year is going to be his biggest opportunity. I think that he is going to be put in the position to succeed the most than he ever has in his career, certainly within his first season and even, into the Peterson era. And so I think that I'm leaning more towards bust because of the context related to how high of a pick he was. I don't even think he'll have the opportunity to prove that he's an elite quarterback next year because a lot of the damage is done. So I think that the best case scenario for Trevor Lawrence is that he shows that he's a competent quarterback and he prepares himself for a more elite type style breakout season the following year.
And again, everyone interprets the word differently. Like you're using the
Yeah.
word elite. When I'm talking about breakout season, I'm just referring to like I have a hard time imagining him breaking like that top 12 quarterbacks in the league.
Okay.
I'd settle at this point if you're the Jaguars coming off these last couple of seasons. I feel like you would settle for looking at him and saying, "Yeah, this guy's still above average, and we can see improvement and build
Sure.
within the system." So yeah, I'm
I guess
unfortunately down.
what I'm thinking of, basically, I guess you could say my bright line for breakout for Trevor Lawrence is like, can he, not even for breakout, because again, I don't think it's possible for him to have a breakout season just because like, I think it's going to be a new offense. Like, I don't think he's in the position to do so, which is important when you're having this conversation. But in terms of setting himself up for a future breakout, I think best case scenario for him that's realistic is having a top 10 season.
Okay. All right.
But we'll see. We'll see. All right, next up we got Keon Coleman.
Keon Coleman, this is going to be one of those ones where surrounding Keon Coleman, I am now it's only been one season, but I might end up being incredibly wrong about this, and I hope I was so. I was pissed when the Chiefs traded back and didn't take with the Bills and then didn't take Keon Coleman. I really wanted Keon Coleman.
Over Worthy?
Yes.
Okay.
At the time, what I see in Keon Coleman in terms of potential is someone who gives me shades of Mike Evans.
Sure.
So, like Keon Coleman's I don't think ever going to be a guy who could be a top 3 wide receiver in the league. But he could. I think the ceiling is something to where, and I'm not saying the ceiling is Mike Evans because that's a crazy thing to say now, especially in the context
Right.
of his last season. But Keon Coleman does have the ability to be a wide receiver one. I
Yes.
think that's a fact. And so I would say, especially with, as we talked about, the way that the Bills' offseason went with not really adding any
Right.
major additions to the weaponry, I think, yeah, it is more likely to me that Keon Coleman breaks out than turns into someone who we look at now as a bust.
Yeah, I completely agree. For me, when I say like have a breakout year, specifically regarding Coleman, I'm basically thinking like, can he establish himself as the clear number one target for Josh Allen? And not even just like the amount of targets, but just like, is he the number one option there? Like, is he the guy for Josh Allen? Because, and I think 100% he can get to that level, partly just because of a lack of competition within that, receiver room. But like partially because I do think that he has all of the tools and the skills necessary to get there. And so yeah, I think he's primed for a breakout season. I think a lot of the decisions that the Bills made related to their offseason choices was because they had Keon Coleman. I really like the pick then. I really like it
Yeah.
now. I think that he's going to do really well.
I like the way that you put it, which is almost to where, not that there is obviously a level of personal talent and ability involved, but he has a greater likelihood of doing so just based on the situation that he's in. Like he
Yeah,
almost de facto is going to be put in a higher likelihood of
right.
having a season that fills out the stat line more so than last season as a rookie.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I was talking about with Trevor Lawrence, where it's like, I'm not going to say that he's necessarily going to be a bust because I believe in Liam Cohen and his scheme. But when it comes to the situation, I don't think he's situationally going to be primed to have a breakout season. I think if Trevor Lawrence is on one end of the spectrum, Keon Coleman is on the exact opposite end, where he has the best opportunity to have a breakout season. You're talking about an MVP quarterback who just had one of the best seasons of his career, that's looking for that solid weapon, and he can just, he's just like gifted this perfect situation for him to be that.
Entirely right. Yep. Entirely right.
All right, finally, we have Adonai Mitchell. This one's a tough one because, and I'll just speak personally, I really like Mitchell. I think that he has the potential to be a really, really good, maybe even top 5 wide receiver within the NFL. Last year, he had 23 receptions for 55 targets, 312 yards, and was a big kind of deep threat. He had almost breakout games. His biggest issue was he struggled with drops. And I'm not
Yeah.
going to say
Yeah.
that isn't a big issue. That is a big issue. And I don't think that next year, and you have to take context into it. Is Anthony Richardson the type of quarterback that can allow a young wide receiver to have a breakout season? I think no, right? And okay,
Yeah.
maybe Anthony Richardson doesn't work out. Is Daniel Jones able to do that? Maybe. I don't think.
I
I
mean,
don't think so.
maybe this is a
Maybe
hot take.
maybe
I mean,
it's just because of
Daniel
Malik
Daniel
Neighbors.
Jones is
But
more likely to than Anthony Richardson.
oh,
I'll
I
say that
agree.
right
I mean,
now.
that low-key happened last year with Malik Neighbors. So, but I think they're on different levels. The point I'm making is basically last year heading into week 10, Adonai Mitchell, listen to this. What led wide receivers in the NFL in terms of the advanced metrics that measure separation. But he also was one of the worst wide receivers when it comes to dropping the
To
ball.
drops. Yeah.
So for a guy who's 6'4" and 4'3", and runs a 4.340 to be able to create that much separation just provides
Crazy.
such an incredible ceiling. If he
Yeah.
can figure out how to catch the ball, I think that he can be incredible. Do I think that's going to happen next year? No. So I think he's going to be a bust, I guess, in the context of this game. But I don't think, I think that eventually he'll get there.
Yeah, this seems like a situation to where it's someone who, because of the context of the situation that he's in, specifically who's throwing him the ball, like he's going to go completely under the radar, and whether it's because he gets traded to another team or the quarterback situation completely changes around, the first season after any sort of major change to his situation, people are going to go, whoa, I mean, this guy, we thought he was a bust, but, he's finally come back on the scene. And it's like,
Exactly.
well, he kind of was already there. He just didn't
He
have
didn't have the
the
opportunity.
pieces around him to be able to thrive. So I'm
Yeah.
with you there, to where I don't think it's likely that he has a breakout, but I almost feel bad saying that it's then a bust.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's all the players we got. And, we're 2 hours into this, so I think it's okay for us to say goodbye. Next week, we're going to be finishing off the AFC in terms of our off-season grades. Going to be
Yep.
grading the AFC West and the AFC South. It should be a good one. I'm excited.
Yeah, should be a fun time. Thank you all for joining. Make sure to like and subscribe. Check out
Absolutely.
the podcast on other platforms. Give us a rating if you're on a platform that allows you to rate. Check out the social media, our TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, all that. If you like this, you will like that as well. So thanks for tuning in, folks.